Season 4, episode 16 of the Decoded podcast. We're still in 2020, but it's almost over. So the next time we podcast, hopefully, if everything goes well, it will be 2021. And so I have to say, I've been enjoying my time away from work. Even with the announcement that was made by the ministry about us going back when we return to school on January 4th, for me as an elementary school teacher will be remote for at least 1 week. It ruined my holiday for about 10 minutes and then I let it go because I'm not a fan of the remote learning. And even though my school board has issued memos to us about how to do this, how to pivot, it's not going to make it any easier. I mean, there's instructions for I'm responsible for this and I'm responsible for that, but I actually have to do it, right? And so reading a memo and then actually doing what the memo says are two different things. So I put that aside and I will not be picking that up for a while. I'm not going to let it ruin my time away that I worked hard to get to. And then, so I wanted to start with that. Christmas was great. Merry Christmas to you, Chris, and Merry Christmas to everybody else. It was yesterday, but we didn't cast yesterday. The other thing I wanted to say, it's gone now. It's snowing like crazy, though. It was a white Christmas, so that was kind of cool.
And a surprise, eh? Because we kind of went from where I'm at in York Region, we went from rain and like it was so clear out, I could actually see on people's lawns where they had mowed last, because there's a few people on my street that I think late September, early October, when we had some of those warm days, those peeps had their lawnmower out. And I'm like, no. I get to sort of mid-September and I put the lawnmower away. I'm just like, I'm done. I don't need to lawn mow anymore. And there was a conversation in the house as far as our backyard. Are we going to mow that? And I'm kind of looking at it. I'm like, it looks good and lush. Like the grass in the back looks lush. And I'm actually, I'm kind of looking at this long kind of like swishy kind of soft grass. I'm like, no, that looks great. I'm just going to leave it. So yeah, about mid-September. As I'm saying it, I think it has something to do with my own receding hairline. I got to be honest. I'm looking at this long grass. I'm like, man, wish I had a head of hair of that. It's kind of a weird response, but either way, so I just let it grow, watching the grass sweep over kind of action going on, because there's some spots that are kind of bare,
right? But
the long grass is kind of hiding it over. So my backyard and front yard has a few green sweep overs.
Well, it's I can make a connection to what you're saying, because
That's a ridiculous thing. Which part? We're both follically challenged to a degree, so we're gonna just walk away from the green sweep over. It's a horrible image.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I want to go back to is like a day or two before Christmas, you could see my front lawn. Well, you could see my front and back lawn, but the front lawn, you could actually see
the lines,
the tire tracks. And I was appreciative. I was like, look at that lawn.
Look at that lawn.
That is legit. I was loving every minute of it.
So ridiculous.
Now it's covered in like this much snow, like at least 30 centimeters. I took a picture this morning of our pergola, and on top of the pergola, the snow, and it's at least a school centimeter ruler. No, well, I'm calling it 30 centimeters. I'm not going to call it a foot, because we're in Canada, bro. Come on.
That's okay. That's all right.
School centimeter ruler. No, well, I'm calling it 30 centimeters.
Okay, let me drop into this then. So I sent you that message yesterday, the dad details. Did you pick that up on? I messaged John Polo. So I got my snowblower out again.
I saw you. Yeah, you teased me with just a quick video of your snowblower running. You don't even say anything.
Well, the follow-up one was.
I can't. Oh, I didn't see the follow-up, but I can't tell you what I called you.
That's okay.
But anyway, because I didn't use my snowblower yesterday. I went out and shoveled by hand because I wanted the exercise. I think I poloed you, and you saw that.
Yep.
But today, it's going strong, so I might use the snowblower today.
We got a little bit of sun. We got a little bit. It's peeking. Oh no, it's both. I'm looking up through my dungeon window here. So, but I wanted to just land lightly on because I don't know if we've talked about this on the cast about the dad details. I know we kind of we've talked one to one about that, but just it's funny how that the dad details and using the snowblower, how they kind of it's intoxicating. It's intoxicating. Like it's out, and I think this has to do with I don't do it with the lawn,
Hmm.
but you kind of you touched on the dad details, the fact that you
The
could
lines.
see the lines on the actual grass, and I don't get that from the lawn. My lawns are too irregularly shaped,
Mm.
but damn it, give me a straight rectangle of a driveway, and I'm trying to get that snowblower right up to the edges. Like I'm not happy with the edging on the driveway unless I can see just a little bit of the grass, just a little bit of the grass there. So I know and it's so, and this is why I go with the dad detail. So spent that I no longer actually spend extra time trying to make almost ridiculously 90-degree edges at the edge of both of my driveway sides. Um, I've gotten to a place where I'm a little bit better at it, so I can do it quicker. But here's the thing about the dad details that I think you and I landed on before. There's another inches of snow on the driveway again today. So all those crisp edges are gone. They're all slightly rounded. I can see just like the shape, the slight roundish shape of where I did a nice clean crisp edge along the driveway and the sidewalk. It's all covered in snow again today. So I'm working. I go for a walk this morning. I'm working through my mourning process, my grieving process of only having a crisp, clean driveway for like an hour yesterday. I'm measuring the effort that it took and, trying to decide this morning whether or not I want to. And it's funny, my brain kind of gets to a space where I say to myself, well, maybe it's going to warm up enough today that it's just going to all melt off. Not the go back out and do it again. I don't know if I have the dedication. I don't know if I have the discipline. No, sorry, wrong word. I don't have the motivation. Definitely don't have the motivation to go back out today. Maybe I'll pull the shovel. The snow's lighter today. Yesterday it was like snowman snow, snow person snow. I guess I'll correct it.
Oh, even the snowman's gone.
Even the snowman's gone, but that's okay. But yeah, it's packing snow. I should just call it that. It's packing snow, right? And today it's a little bit of that lighter stuff, a little more wispy, so it could move faster. You know what? I saw someone out using an actual leaf blower.
Oh,
Yeah, which I'd never actually seen. They're using a leaf blower on their driveway. Not this, our previous snow, not this one. It was, I think we had a little bit of a snowfall sometime in the last week, just after when school ended, whatever. So they were using a leaf blower on their driveway, and I thought that's original. I'd never seen that before. But you gotta have some light ass snow for that to work. Like
yeah.
you're not moving packing snow with a leaf blower.
I saw a video on socials of a guy using his flamethrower to
Oh,
to melt the snow right off the driveway, and it was, I don't know what type of snow it was, but it was pretty cool. He would it was the Elon Musk one, the one that it's shaped like a gun, and you pull the trigger and it fires out the flame. So he was literally going like from right to left, and you'd see the snow just go, and then from left to right, and you just see the next layer just go. And it was hilarious because it was just funny to see this guy just doing this all the way down his driveway.
you imagine seeing that? You're walking down the street for your walk in the morning, and you just see the flare up of someone using a flamethrower.
I have to be honest.
Do it.
I would love to have that just for fun, just to try it once. And here's the thing. I think my neighbors thought I was crazy because I go out there and I shovel, and it was friggin' heavy. You're right. It was snow person snow.
Snow person
Um,
snow.
it was layered. So like I always look at my layers first. So the bottom, this dad details, the bottom layer had been sitting there all night and it was wet. And then the top, like 1/3 was a harder, wet, heavier layer. Then 2/3 was a lighter layer. But what happens is when you get the shovel and you you push the snow, the bottom layer comes up the shovel to the top and then sits on top of the light snow.
Yep.
So it's just heavy and it's wet
Yep.
and it sticks to my my shovel. So I'm like, okay, well, I got nowhere to be, and we had already done our Christmas thing, so everybody was just kind of chilling in the house. So I go outside to do the driveway. The minute I finish, I see the garage doors open, and I hear the roar of the snow blowers. And I just shake my head like this would have been the perfect. This would have been it would have been the first time I used it all year, but maybe today, maybe today. So it was good exercise, though. It was
Mm-hmm.
good exercise, but yeah, the dad details, man. And I appreciate what you said about discipline versus motivation. You do have the discipline to do it. Like, I know you well enough to say that discipline's not the issue. But yeah, the motivation to kickstart it and then to go from there, that's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. Um, can we talk a little bit about the on ramp? Just, is
Yep.
that okay with you? I just want to talk about, you and I talked about,
Of course.
you and I talked about being parents. It was, the on ramp was dedicated, yeah, Tattoos on the Heart. Great book. I want to thank David Terrio for sending it my way.
And Greg Boyle too.
Oh, Father
Yep.
Greg Boyle, I'm going to
Yep.
call him, but
I'm gonna
Greg Boyle,
kick it informal though. I'll just
that's
I'll call him G because that's all he's called in the book. People just call him G.
that's right. So
Yep.
we thank Father Greg, for writing it, and then I thank David for sending it to me,
Yep.
for knowing something about me that he had a feeling it would work for me, and it did, and it does, because I revisit the book. It's not a book that I read once and leave it alone. I've
Mm-hmm.
revisited. Um, but you and I were talking about the real deal of being parents, particularly dads, and then weave in some Stoic philosophy on dealing with your fate, whatever it may be, and just going with it. Like, just stop ignoring what's in front of you and go with the flow and move with it. Doesn't mean that you just sit back and you let things happen. You obviously you grab a hold of it, and you work with what you've been given, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to say, in a cryptic way, thanks for listening, Chris, to my
Mm-hmm.
story. And it's a story that I think many parents could connect to around their kids and how to navigate life with teenagers, right? But I wanted to say that I think, I can't remember the last time you and I had a serious conversation on the on ramp. Serious as in like real deal serious, like parent serious,
Mm-hmm.
dad serious. Um, it never stops, the whole parenting thing. Just when you think you have it figured out, which, trust me, I've never felt that, but some people do. I know some people, they've got kids and they think their kids are just perfect and that life is just moving along. As a teacher, I have to tell you, I've not met one perfect kid. Just like I'm not a perfect parent, I'm not a perfect teacher. I've not met one perfect kid, and I guess I'm taking a weird kind of turn here, but it brings me to how parents view their children. And you and I talked a little bit about that too. That there is uh, there is a reality some people live in that's not the true everyday reality that we deal with when we walk out of our houses every day.
Mm-hmm.
There is that true reality, and then there's the realities that we create. And I think you can do what you want, but once you lose grip with the real stuff that's happening around you, then I think you got a problem. And that came up a little bit in our talk too. um, I'm all for these fun realities that people create. Like, look at you and I have this podcast. It is not the way the world works, but you and I, for an hour or two every Saturday, tend to enter into our own little world. And I'm sure
True.
people listen, and people are like, what is wrong with these guys? Like, what are they talking about? Where are they getting this from?
Mm-hmm.
It's our reality. But once we sign off, we walk away from the podcast, we're entering into the real world. What's going on with our families? What's happening outside? What do we need to do to make the day run smoother? What are our responsibilities outside of having fun on a podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the on-ramp was educational today, a little bit more serious than usual. And I'm glad that we were able to talk about the realities as now we sit in this little bubble. The bubble. That could be the title of this podcast. I'm going to write that down. And for once, we're talking about a bubble that has nothing to do with the pandemic.
Yeah, to go back just a sec to that whole little reality that we've created. That's I want to go I want to go sideways just off that for a second.
Drive off the cliff.
It could just be that it's the side road that's kind of running parallel to the highway, let's say. I'm not going right off the cliff yet, but I was watching on socials that there was a comment on socials about podcasts that brought up the idea of the podcasting space, that basically it'd be really great if there was less old white dude content. And it's just funny, it reminds me of that created, and I've connected with with the person that posted it and had a few exchanges about that. And what was interesting is that the initial conversation is kind of around, well, I'm happy to engage in this conversation with you. I got that sense. The individual, though, because they're right now producing a podcast that looks at intersectionality between a little bit of travel, a little bit of culture, music. It's an interesting kind of mix. And the pushback that when I first started connecting with this person was, I just said, would you be open to talking a little bit more about this? I'm curious. And the request back is, well, yeah, we could go there. Beforehand, though, just could you share with me some of the spaces where you've had discussions about what I'm talking about here? So where have you done the work to sort of understand why a statement like that would be made? That was my take on that, which is so on point. Me asking, it's a funny thing about doing podcasting, that you can feel like you're entitled to ask questions of whoever you want. And if you're an old white dude, you probably don't even blink to think about what asking someone about their reality would be like, or how they might be protecting their reality, or the type of reality that they want to create or speak to. So I really appreciated this little bit of pushback, and actually shared a couple episodes of Chasing Squirrels where I felt like we got close to that conversation where I was in there. I shared a couple episodes of Decoded, and I said, I'm happy. This is kind of where I'm repping. Here's the reality that I'm coming from. And haven't had the follow-up conversation yet. It was interesting because when I asked to have a conversation about the comment, because I don't disagree with it. I don't disagree with it at all. Like if either all that is seen, or all that the space, all the oxygen in the room is being taken up by white folks' content, then I get it. Like why not push back and say, how are you creating space and creating opportunity for individuals if all you're doing is constantly talking about your own crap? Like how do those two things work? I don't have a really great answer, because I do enjoy meeting up and chatting with you. I also recognize that in doing so, I'm just promoting basically singularly just our two voices. But I like the when you had mentioned that idea of the reality that we're choosing to create each Saturday. It's we have had people say before that part of what connects them, at least to our reality, is there's no enforcement to follow our rules. There's no on-ramp song that you have to be there for. There's no we don't use many of the sort of tools of podcasting that kind of trigger that exact same framework that could say this is a highly produced conversation. You just get to kind of, it's almost like you're open. It's that moment of walking into the staff room and there's a bunch of conversations going on, and you could choose whether or not you want to just listen into one of the conversations, or you can put in your earbuds and listen to something else. And a few people have kind of said one of the things that they appreciate is that it just sounds like we're grabbing a beer and having a conversation at the end of the week, the kind of weekly roundup. So I'm looking forward to following up that other conversation with this podcaster that I discovered. Also looking forward to what their sort of perspective is on where our conversations have gone, where my conversations have gone. Yeah, I'll follow up if I get any messages back. I know I'm being cryptic, but I didn't have any advance accord as to whether or not I was going to sort of push any elements of this out. Suffice it to say, it's a new podcaster, cool podcast. I've listened to their first episode. It's a good podcast. It's worth checking out. Yeah, I know.
There's a lot of cryptic today.
The cryptic
episode.
I'll follow up
what
next
a nice
week.
way.
I'll connect. I'll mention again. I don't want to. I'm also savvy about. I'm savvy about taking up other people's air. So, yeah, I don't have a comfort space. I'll learn how to do this better. I'll figure it out. But I do feel, and I could be wrong on this. I feel like because of the starting point of the conversation about white folks taking up other folks' space, I don't know if I'm just obscuring. I don't even know if I'm making this any better. Am I making it any better? I don't know. Did I actually make something worse? I don't know. I don't know if mentioning at this point. I don't know. I'll sit on the mistake. I'll figure it out. I'll come back to it next week.
You'll have to let me know.
Mm-hmm.
Between the two of us about this podcast, because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to drop it. I'm going to make the mistake. Should I make the mistake?
I don't know why you keep calling it a mistake.
Because it's not the mistake of the conversation. It's the mistake that I've made by obscuring it. So yeah, I'm going to own it. So it's the Rad Rupa mixtape.
That's what it's called?
Yeah, I think that's the name of it. Rad Rupa mixtape. And it's good stuff. It's an interesting format where there's a mix of music and social commentary. Yeah, I was sort of reaching out, just saying, because there was a comment about too much white dude content. It was, I'm totally paraphrasing, but me reaching out was, I'd love to talk about this more. I feel like I don't know what I'd be contributing, but I'm curious about the perspective of it. I don't deny the perspective. There's a whole lot of spaces out there where it seems like it is a lot of white folk content. But yeah, so Rupa has pushed back and said, let me check out and see what you're posting up. Let's see. And I took that to mean, give me the information so I can make a decision as to whether or not that a conversation can take place at a deeper level. I also think that I didn't word the question very well. I might have kind of imposed the idea that I wanted to have it via podcast, which I don't necessarily need to. I just kind of want to talk about it more. So yeah, Rad Rupa. I love the song that Rupa picked to sort of include in episode 1. So I like the concept of a mixtape.
What are your thoughts about your perspective of, or not your perspective, the perspective that there's too much white guy perspective podcasts out there?
I think that, so my initial I would agree. I think that there is a lot of so here's where it gets messy. I would agree. But I would also agree that there's a misalignment, not a misalignment. There's a, we've watched the flow of, you longer than I watched the flow of edu celebs. God, we haven't talked about edu celebs in a while. It almost feels strange to say that word. We've watched the flow, the rise and fall, the buoyancy, my God, the buoyancy of some edu celebs and the ridiculous behavior that they engage in. And maybe because their mea culpa doesn't play out on socials in the same way that their mistake making happens. Um, so, never really finding out what the restitution is after individuals, try and police, tone police or culture police people, or make hasty generalizations about how people should operate on socials, yet really they're talking about white people rules. I think that we still, I think part of, because I've kind of pulled anyone. I have a very quick reflex to, if you seem, actually, I'll go a different route. One of the things that I keep doing is anything that gets promoted in my timeline on Twitter, I block every single time. It's a stupid game I play. So anything that gets promoted to my timeline, I block. So it's a behavior. Won't explain it. I just don't, I think to myself, I'm not going to willingly let you take up any space on my timeline. The second thing is, I don't follow any American feeds. I only have Canadian content in my feeds. So I'm constantly searching for trying to be a locavore in my Twitter stuff. And I would say those two steps has kind of greatly reduced the edu-celeb content in my feeds. Some still pop up. And when I do, I'm becoming more and more, I guess, kind of strident in asking questions about things that I don't understand, or trying to find out what's the context for this statement. I do think that, that there's still the names. So if it's no longer about seeing people popping up in the feed, and I'm not trying to use, like, it's really naive almost to say that just because I'm doing the blocking that these individuals don't exist. But if the name brands still elicit any kind of like gooey, starry-eyed response, I think that there's still a lot of, I think that there's probably still more white folks populating that list as far as key names in edu-celebrism. Before we started knocking down the sort of like the iconoclast movement of any sort of statues or let's say edu-celebs, before that started, the list was still primarily white. So when it got to the space where people are like, yeah, that's messed up. Like, I can't even believe that person who has, written a book and is sort of promoting this really narrow cultural lens of what education is. There weren't I think that was singularly speaking to white folks as edu-celebs. Like, I don't think we were seeing a list that was diverse. When we were talking about edu-celebrity, I think we were talking about white folks. So I have a history. If you go back through my Chasing Squirrels back catalog, I spoke to more white folks than I did people of color. I spoke to more men than I did of people that identify as male. I spoke to more of those folks than I did of people that identify as female or don't identify to either. There wasn't any awareness that I had as far as building a broad, diverse content area to include those lenses as well. So back to your original question, actively looking and not giving air to individuals that are just still inflating themselves into that space, I think is, I think that's good for podcasting. I think that's great for podcasting. I don't know if I answered your question, because I feel like for me, I'll take it back to the fact that Rupa pushed back and said, tell me a little bit about yourself before you have any expectation of hearing my view on this. I think that's a perfect post. That's a perfect reminder of the exact thing that Rupa was calling out in the tweet. My response to the tweet was expecting that she would explain her perspective. So now I work through the details.
Our boy Tim has stepped in uh, to talk. Well, he's
Mhm.
listening to us, and a couple of things. Good morning from
Mhm.
BC. So,
Morning,
good morning
Tim.
back to you, Tim. Thanks for checking us out. Um, Tim says that our topic is an interesting one at the moment, that you stepped
And there
into
air
Cluff.
quotes. I always get twisted with the air quotes. I hope there's a follow up. You know what? Because that's what my mom says.
That's what your
My
mom
mom says that
says.
whenever I post something on feed
Okay.
on Facebook, one of my
Yeah.
poems or something that I've created, sooner or later it's like interesting. So I like to push for that. So I think that Tim's chasing this one a little bit. That does that hurt podcasters? Well, not white podcasters.
Right. Yeah, yeah, not white podcasters. And here we have another comment. Creators like us have to find ways to share their content.
So can I lean on that one too?
Lean.
So I guess the question is who's in that pool of creators and who's in that pool of us? So because I would agree if Tim is mentioning that we as creators like is the concept I like it. So this is kind of so when we think creators, digital creators, who do we see? And are we actively pushing back on who's not at the table? It reminds me a little bit of Washburn this morning posted something up about makerspaces and reminding us that makerspaces aren't about 3D printers only.
Hmm.
It's about having markers, sewing materials. It's about having, hammers, nails, wood, glue, sculpting paste, everything that sort of falls into the makerspace. I think podcasting and us as creators, if podcasting is a makerspace, what resources are missing and what people are missing. And I think that's I don't know if Tim is can sort of drop any wisdom on that, but that idea of I do agree we need tools, but really we're not starving for tools. No one's starving for tools. I mean, the equity question is, do you have a mobile device that allows you to post something on Twitter and you're a podcaster? Like really, we labeled us as pod tubers just because we say things on video and we post it to YouTube. Yay, we're pod tubers. But if there's no access, if that door's locked,
I
then you don't get to be a creator and you don't get to be us.
right. So I would agree. There are some questions about who gets to become a creator.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like what Tim's saying about creators like us have to find ways to share their content, but I take it a step further and say, why do I have to share their content? Why can't we empower them to share their own content? Like, what is it? Is the way that we do podcasting turning people off of it who really could benefit from sharing their stories, their creations, their ideas? I really like the idea of. I know. Go ahead and jump in before I keep forming my thoughts because you got something to say there.
No, I got it. You go, you go, you go.
I'm just gonna say, like, yeah, it's one thing to tap people on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I wanna share your story," but it's another to tap people on the shoulder and say, "Hey, why don't you start something like this and you share your story and let it evolve and share other people's stories and let it evolve," right? This whole everything around equity, it's so in front of us now, or at least it feels that way because of the pandemic really did cause people to push back on the whole concept of equity. And I love that it did. I hate the pandemic, but I love in that respect what it's done. So for example, as soon as somebody says, "Oh, well, we have to take teaching online now." Awesome. Half my class doesn't have what they need to do that. The system needs to step up now. Whereas the system before didn't want to see it or didn't see it or didn't have to see it. Like, oh, well, we teach face to face every day, so it's all good. Your kids will we can bus them to you. We can have a desk for them, and we can have um, pencils and paper for them. They don't necessarily need a computer. And then the minute we shifted, it's like, no, they need a computer, and they should have been given one before we were forced to give them one. Well, we didn't have the funding. Well, that's because maybe we should sit down and look at how funding works. Who's making these decisions? How are they being made? Who's sitting at the table making these decisions? Who's missing from the table and why? Like, all these things start to grow from that, right? And there was, like, when I think of my local situation, there are a handful of educators who have been pushing, uh, maybe it's the wrong word, but they've been pushing equity for years, talking
Mhm.
about what's right and what's wrong and what's just and what's keeping us from being just. And I dare say that what's stopping people from doing the right thing are processes and policies in place that you can stand behind. Say, well, this is how we get our funding. We just don't have enough money. Or, we're putting our money here. Or this is if you want something like this, you have to jump through these hoops. And on the third hoop, you find out that what particular student or family is not eligible because of another hoop that they've jumped through, or that another hoop that they can't jump through. It's just one thing after the other. But you know what? All of a sudden, with this pandemic, people are getting what they need to do this remote learning. And the only reason they're getting it is because we as a society, as a system, can't blatantly turn away from people in this situation. If public education is there to serve the public, and we turn around and we say, we're not doing this. We don't care that Jimmy doesn't have a computer. We don't have the money, so Jimmy's just going to have to sit at home and do nothing. They can't say that. They being the people in power. Instead of having a backward system, why don't you just flip it and look at how do we get the money to get everybody one of these devices and internet access so that they can learn remotely if they choose to learn remotely starting today? Why does it have to be a pandemic that ties our hands? Why can't we flip it and use this time as an opportunity for equity and to create some new processes and policies, which you and I both know that's where the anti-racism lives. It lives in the policies. So why can't you write anti-racist policies? Why can't you write equitable policies? Because it works against somebody at some point in the game. And that somebody that it works against is in position of power.
Mhm.
That's my perspective, my opinion, based on my observations and my reading and lived experience. I'm going to say that. I've not said that as much as maybe I should. My lived experience takes me down a different road. I was a kid. If this happened when I was a kid, we had no computer. We didn't have internet access until my sister was a late teenager who got a job and then spent her money getting the AOL online stuff. My sister did that. My parents didn't do that. My sister bought a family computer because my sister worked for it and saw that there was there was a something going on here that we should be part of. But if I was in school and this happened, my parents wouldn't have been able to afford to buy me a computer and my sister and my brother a computer. It wouldn't have happened.
And I think the conflation of your experience and my experience is a major part of the problem. As you're saying, you didn't have a computer, you wouldn't be able to do this. One of my responses, yeah, I know. I only had like a VIC 20. I would have never been able to do it either. And in even revealing the fact that I had a low level computer to use, I'm revealing that our experience is fundamentally different. I don't get to sort of have the same experience of you when you don't have a computer and mix it up with me saying, yeah, I get what you're saying. My computer sucks. I wouldn't be able to do this either. No, it's you don't have a computer. You don't have you don't have the thing. You might not have the computer you want, Clough, but you have the computer. It's a totally different conversation. And I think sometimes that's part of what's happening here that makes it that's stalling that's stalling the discussion around what do we actually need to do differently. Because at the fundamental is if the idea, and I'll from it. So one of the interesting conversations I'm in right now as a cert is individuals that are asking for. So there's a lot of conversation around how do we get better. So the SIA claims, that special equipment amount. So individuals with an IEP that have a laptop that they've gotten back in grade 3 or 4. So they've had one for quite some time. The laptop is a laptop and it does work. It works for the most part with the learning system right now. We'll not talk about the extra infrastructure. It doesn't, if you have see a laptop, but you can only use the Wi-Fi at the school, well, then you're missing an elemental piece of being able to do online learning. Because if you don't have Wi-Fi at your house, which is the case for students that are in my school, the only answer is we need to get you a rocket stick, like a Wi-Fi stick, in order to do it, right? But I'm just kind of taking back to the fact that there are individuals with a SIA laptop that are now, because they're having to lean on it in a way that they hadn't before, as in use it for all their learning. I do have parents that are asking for upgrades, like they want to get a newer laptop. My perspective, and I keep sort of pushing back, is trying to make sure that every one of my kids has some device. They have something that they can access it. And I'm not satisfied if they say, oh yeah, I have my mobile phone. I'm like, well, no, let's see if we can swing it so you get a Chromebook. So something that you can actually use with a little bit more agility than having to sort of just type with your fingers. And you know what I mean? So I'm trying to understand the space where how people are conflating their experience. They're mixing their experiences. It's the same experience. Some people are opportunizing, as in, oh, now would be a good time to ask for a better laptop. But I'm trying to remain clear in my mind so that I'm not seeing those situations as part of the same challenge, because you do have to ask different questions. It is a lot easier. Both are serious. I would take both as serious questions, but the more serious issue is that if there's a student right now that can't access their online learning because, like, we can't change the online learning element. That's one of the things we can't switch out right now. So then the only thing is, well, how do we get the right equipment so the kid can access their learning? And I think it's a far more, probably not think, from what I observed, it seems like it's a far more complex issue at elementary. I will say, though, putting the two experiences together, that my tech is crap is the same as you not having tech. We're having a similar emotional experience of not being able to do school. I mean, I guess that's similar. We're both not able to do school in a way that we want to. Your issue of not having is the equity issue I would rather spend time trying to solve right now. And then I'm going to eventually get to the people that are in the queue. They're saying, yeah, it runs kind of laggy. Or I have to keep it plugged in while I'm using it because the battery's not that great. I'm working on that stuff too, don't get me wrong. But I'm trying to see the individuals that don't have, that there's just nothing there.
Well, let's go with, I got a great example for you. About a great example of how I see some of this system working. And then we've got a couple of comments here that I'd like to hit upon. Well, first, let's go with this one because it's kind of fun. Tim says, good old dial-up. I remember those days. It was good times. My sister would piss me off, so I would unplug the telephone jack, and then all of a sudden her internet's gone. She's freaking out. I plug it back in. She'd come in my room and be like, did you unplug it? I'm like, no, I didn't do anything. After half an hour of her telling me I couldn't use the computer. So what happened was my sister bought a computer, but it was her computer. I mean, she let us use it, but it was her computer and it was her dial-up or whatever. And I get into university, and my parents, they bought me a typewriter, a really cool electric typewriter, and it could do a lot of cool things. And for me, for me, it was huge. I was like so appreciative that they did that. I would have loved that they buy me a computer, but they didn't. They bought me a digital or an electric typewriter. And so my parents would say, when I'd go to write an essay or whatever, they'd be like, Roland has what he needs to do his job. Mm-hmm. But I'll never forget the time that I got one of my papers back and I got a B plus, and I was so proud. And I showed my dad. My dad was looking through it, and the professor had written all over it, like all his feedback was on my paper. It was like a 10-page paper or something. It was a law paper. So it was kind of, detailed, anal, whatever. And my dad's going through, and at the end, my dad says to me, and my dad's English wasn't that great. And his reading wasn't that great, but he goes, what's it saying here? On the last page, it was like loaded with comments. And I said, the professor's saying, Dad, that I made a lot of errors, like typewriter errors that, it took away, it distracted him from my argument, and it brought him to like grammar and stuff like that. And so I lost marks for that. And my dad looked at me, and then he looked at the paper, and it said, you would have received an A minus or an A if I wasn't so distracted by the typewriter glitches. So you're getting a B plus, but if I weren't distracted, this would be an A minus or an A paper. And the minute my dad saw that, he looked at me and he said, we're buying you a computer. It was a moment where it was always about, do you have what you need to do your job? And it was never about luxury between my father and I. It was always, yes, Dad, I have what I need. I can do this. That's kind of how I was raised. And then my dad looks at me and he's like, oh my God, everybody else is using a computer. They're not making these errors because it's much easier on a computer. How come you're not using your sister's computer? Like, there was a lot of questions. It boiled down to, it's her computer, and I'm not going to sit here all night and wait for it. I'm going to type my paper, right? Like, I'm going to do my job. Why aren't you printing at school? Well, because it costs money to print papers off at school, and I don't have much money, and I'm not going to ask you for money. It ended with, okay, what do we do to get you a computer? And I feel like our education system has never operated that way. It's just like you said, okay, Lisa has a computer, but it's got to remain plugged in for her for it to be effective. And then you've got, Joseph, who says, I don't even have one. Can somebody get me one? Like, I don't have anything. So while Lisa's complaining that she can't watch television and do her remote learning because she's plugged into the wall and she can't leave the plug, you got a kid with nothing. And again, the system is like, well, look, it's built into you and I. It's about priority. Lisa has one. Hey, Lisa, can you back off? I got to get Joseph something. He's got nothing. So we got a problem, right? And what I've just said to you fits perfectly in with a comment that Michelle made. Michelle is a teacher in my school board, quite techie. She's part of that tech group. She agrees about our term of system, that it shouldn't rely just on individual school to provide the tech, leaving fewer devices at schools who may not have the resources to purchase their own tech. And I've worked at both types of schools. I've worked at schools where we've had an abundance of technology, and I've worked at schools where we haven't. And what Michelle just said there is exactly what happened to my school 2 days before we left for Christmas break. We have kids in the building who don't have computers at home. We have kids who made requests in August to let the system know we don't have computers. So if you can lend us one, that's great. So what happened, Chris? 2 days before school ended, my principal told all staff, grab all the school Chromebooks, put them back in the bins, and send them to the library. We need to redeploy our computers. So the first thing is, people were like, uh-oh, I was kind of hoping I'd get to use these machines for the next 2 days to engage my kids and get them to continue to create stuff and to do stuff. So that's gone. My response was, uh-oh, I can do without 2 days of Chromebooks, but what happens when we come back? They're not going to give back those Chromebooks. So now, again, the whole school is going to be shortchanged. We don't have technology now because it's in the hands of the kids. So the kids, I actually kind of got upset with some of my kids. I found out that they had computers from the school, but they weren't bringing them every day. And I'm like, what are you doing? This is a tool that you're using not only in remote learning, but here. If you've been given a computer by the school to use in case of remote learning, it doesn't stay at home. You pack it in your bag every day and you bring it to school. Because if you don't do that, I don't have the resources to make sure that we all are operating digitally. So as I'm teaching lessons, as I'm preparing you for remote learning, you're telling me I don't have a computer here and I don't have one to give you, but yours is sitting at home? That's not cool. So there's this whole new wave of kids at school with no devices because we've handed them all out, but they won't bring them for whatever reason. I've told my kids, if you have a computer that belongs to the school board, you bring it every day. Now, some days they forget, that happens. I said, because I have some resources, and with my son and with you doing your job, and with the kids who own one that bring it, then we're good. We've got enough devices to make this work. And I can't be handing devices over every 5 seconds like I did in the old days, where I'm like, Jimmy, you go work on this. Give me your computer. I give it to Nora, and then Nora can use it while you're doing something else. I can't do that. Well, I mean, I could, but I'm going to have to like clean it off and whatever. So I'm trying not to do that because I don't want to go there. But it seems like there's always something in the way. There's always an issue. And I've talked about this a million times. I'm getting tired of the issues always falling on the classroom teachers. I'm tired, man. I'm tired of never having enough tech to do what I want to do. I'm tired of the reasons and the processes and the procedures in place. And if you stop and you look, the problems are all at the top. We need more money for this stuff. This is where we're living now. This business of, well, we don't have the money for the computers, those days are over. Money has to go there now because we never know if we're learning remote or not. And if we're a public school system, we have to be able to provide that stuff to our students. So enough of the nonsense, enough of the BS. It needs to happen now. And I'm tired of always solving problems and being creative. I'm tired of it because it always falls on my back. And you get to one point where you think you've solved the problem and a whole new problem exists. Now, if I was chief problem solving officer, then I need more problems to keep my job. But I'm not always supposed to be solving problems. It'd be nice sometimes to just do something the way that it's been presented to you to be done. So all that to say that we as a system and as a society need to relook at these processes and policies that don't work anymore thanks to COVID. They don't work. We need to start rewriting things. And for all the people who think that we're going to go back to normal like we did pre-COVID, I don't think that exists anymore. I don't think we can. COVID itself is mutating all the time, right? It's changing. It's smarter than we are. It's adapting to the way we're dealing with it because it wants to run rampant. So I'm tired, and now I'm speaking up, and people don't like that. Here's another layer. We got Roland speaking up, and Roland's kind of fired up. So Roland's not going to come at this maybe politically the way he should or whatever. I don't care. You know, the mix of COVID, the mix of what my job entails, the mix of, the whole anti-racism movement that all of a sudden I find myself really reflecting on and dealing with. My age, like I got no factors working in my favor to keep me calm anymore. Right? The only thing keeping me at bay, I think, is probably the reading about Stoic philosophy and stuff, what I can control, what I can't control. But, I got 2 kids in the system. My wife's a teacher. We're all going remote January 4th. All day. So we can't help our kids. We need to plan lessons. So we're planning lessons. There's no amount of time you can give me to make sure I get it all done properly. I'll find a way to solve the problem because that's what they keep wanting me to do. And that's the other thing too. Us teachers as a group, we love to help people. We love to solve problems and help people. And the people above us, they love it. because they can keep throwing problems at us knowing, well, somebody's going to solve it, because that's what these people do. That's what educators do. I'm done, man. I'm exhausted of that. I'm exhausted of us having to be creative in how we deal with everything because the people above us won't give us what we need to do the job. The job has changed. You want me to go remote? I love that my school board wrote a memo. I love that there are people like Suzanne Smart and Michelle Booth and Michael Leonard and Chris Demers, who's listening right now. I'm going to put up his comment in a second. I love that these people talk to me and my brothers and sisters in education and support me. Oh, and Judy Merkel, our innovation superintendent. She's responsible for innovation and student learning. These people, I've talked to them enough. I've seen them operate that I know that they're doing their best to help people like me do my job. So I give them thumbs up and props, and I'm sure they're tired too. But I'm friggin' exhausted of trying to solve problems that the system isn't built for. And to rewrite the system, well, that's going to take time because the people in power may necessarily not want anything rewritten because they're the ones in power and it's feeding them somehow. So, having said all that, let me catch up on some comments here. So, a big thumbs up to Tim for saying that my dad was awesome at that moment in time. My dad was awesome sometimes, and sometimes he wasn't so awesome, but that was part of the dad job description. In the middle of my rant, Chris, who is he's our IT, responsible for IT in my school board. Chris is he's pretty innovative, always looking to help us out, always looking for what teachers need to do the job right. So thank you, Chris. Well said, Roland. He totally agrees. Awesome. Chris also said he was really hoping all distributed devices would be required BYOD. It's coming along, Chris. It's coming along. Michelle's got something to say as well. Lots of that stuff going on too with respect to what I was talking about. Not so much for me yet because they are younger, but I sent an email out a few days ago to see who needs a device, and there are several. And even in my class, there are still some kids that need a device that don't have one. Yep, students should be bringing them in daily. I think I've built enough into my classroom routines that the kids that don't have one or that forget to bring it, they kind of pay for it. They kind of pay for it because it's like, it depends too. If they say, well, I forgot or whatever, I listen to what they say and then I'll lend them one that I may have laying around, or they can use a desktop in the room. But it's like, you got to get on it, kids. You got to get on it. Chris talks about the ministry needing to dedicate funding to technology for the classroom. I agree 100%, especially these days. Tim could feel the fire I was bringing. Tim's out. Thanks for listening, Tim. We hope you have a great podcast today. He's doing good stuff. He usually has a panel on, so he gets a lot of cool discussion. Lets people in, not like us, Chris? Not like us.
We're gatekeeping pod tubers.
I hope Chris D wasn't calling me a name here. And then he's got the big happy face, so I must have said something that made him a little happy. So thanks everybody for your comments. Keep them coming because, this isn't just a Chris Clough, Roland Chidiac thing. Let's talk about it, right? Like, I love that you let me talk, Clough, for that long, and you let me just get it out because that's what's burning inside of me. When I'm in the room and I'm with the kids, that stuff goes away because I'm with the kids and I'm pivoting every 2 minutes. Something's happening. I got to deal with it. Got to deal with it. Thanks, Chris. No typo. I appreciate him not calling me names publicly. That's nice. And I'm glad that you agree with me. But you agree with me because you see the value. You see how societies change. You see how this pandemic has shifted everything, right? It shifted everything. If you're going to stand up and you're going to say, Jimmy can't have a computer because I don't want to pay for it, and this is public education and I'm forcing everybody to go remote, that politician is going to be out of a job pretty quick. So they can't say it. They can't say it, but they're not doing it. They're not doing it. And I've never been this political before, ever. But it's driving me nuts that these people won't give us the money we need. And it's not about being liberal, it's not about being conservative. It's what do I need to do my job? They want to save, 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 save. They want to keep their money. They want to give their money to their friends. I'll be your friend. Let me start up a computer company. I'll be your friend. I'll do whatever you like. Just give me the money so I can give the kids. How come nobody sold their soul yet for that? How come nobody's selling their soul yet for the kids? Let's give every kid a computer and let's have, a supply, a reserve, because they're going to break. I had 2 kids late fall, upset like you wouldn't believe. They came to school and they were crying, and I thought something bad had happened to them. You know what happened to them, Clough? Their computer stopped working. The computer that we lent them stopped working. They were scared that I or whatever gatekeeper was going to say to them, "You broke your Chromebook, you're not getting another one." I had to talk them down. I brought them down. I'm like, okay, what happened? The computer doesn't turn on anymore. Okay, have you plugged it in? Yeah, it was plugged in. It won't turn on. Okay, well, let's take it to the gatekeepers, see what they say. And we found out one computer was just dead. It was done. Well, I'm like, well, that's not your fault. Well, and I don't have one. Well, don't worry. Like when you're at school, I'll make sure you have something. I can't help you at home. And then the gatekeeper's like, well, we'll get you one for home, but we just don't have it yet. Okay, I had 2 kids in that situation. I think both kids left without a computer. So what do you think is going to happen January 4th? They're not going to be there ready for attendance. But because I know their situation, I will call them on January 4th. I will welcome them back in. I'll tell them, hey, listen, relax. I'm not going to hit everybody over the head with curriculum until I know everybody's got what they need. And I will make sure to let the school know I checked in with you. You're present, but you don't have any way to join in on a Google Classroom. And I will talk to my superiors and let them know that you don't have a computer. We'll go from there. They were bawling because this is the world we live in now. Oh my God, I don't have a Chromebook. It broke. Am I going to be blamed? Is anybody not going to give me one anymore? This is where they went. That's the first place they went.
I want to go all the way back to your professor. No, I love what you lit me up with, because your professors, the power of your professor's words illuminating that their distraction was your fault, I think is a really powerful reflection on the education system, because I really think that it speaks to the privilege that comes with power, that comes with white-centeredness in education. And I don't know this person. They could have been a person of color. They could be a whole lot of different people that this professor is. I don't know the professor. But the statement speaks to the privilege of education, that somehow your argument would be better without spelling mistakes. And I think you got me thinking about the grammar of equity and how we enter into how not systematically, how stridently we hang on to an order of operations, thinking that it's creating a better essay on your end, when in fact it's a limiting factor. And the power of that professor compelled your father to potentially take on debt. And I'm not arguing the importance of the tool, but if dad's reaction in some ways, I wonder if it was a response to power in addition to in response to your needs. And I think that the professor would never ever know the bug bomb they dropped in your house, intentionally or otherwise, but suggesting that your argument would be less distracting without the spelling mistakes.
I have to say, Clough, th- there are
Yeah,
layers
yeah.
here. So, no, I'm just saying layer number one, my father had great respect for education, because remember, he came from a war-torn country, and his only dream was that his three kids would become educated and get and live a good life. That was what my dad wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So his son's in university, he's in his first year, had a bumpy ride in elementary and high school, and I'm seeing success. And my father, he gave so much power to these people,
Mm-hmm.
right? He gave them so much power, more than they probably deserve. So the minute he saw that, he was like, oh my God, I set you up for this. It's a miracle you've even gotten to university, and here I am not doing what I need to do to help you fulfill my dream, right? So there's one layer. There's my layer of, I was in no position to speak up, right? Because you're right, privilege and power. Here you've got a first-year university student. I'm not going to go to the professor and argue that, what the hell are you doing? Taking away marks. My argument was sound, but you're taking away marks because of, spelling mistakes or whatever.
Because of their distraction.
Right.
Like if that was as you're remembering it, and you're paraphrasing a memory, but if that was that, dude, that is something that I have written on essays before. So I'm reading their argument, whatever it might be. I'm reading their paper. I get their paper. My privilege of education should, almost like to a degree, kind of stop there. I understand what you've written. I see what you've written. It is a good argument. But I'm going to tell you, your argument would be less distracting if you just didn't have these spelling mistakes. Now, I'm not saying to ignore spelling mistakes. And I'm not saying that if the spelling mistake actually changed the word such that I actually can't read around it. But if I'm using my privilege in the right direction, I'm not hanging a kid up on their grammar and saying that my distraction is their fault, that their intent was to distract me. So thus, I need you to write it in a cleaner fashion so that I don't get tripped up in my own distraction. And I get that there's space to build literacy, but I also understand that grammar, the grammar of equity, means that you're going to force someone to work within a system, in this particular case, work within a system that actually doesn't benefit them at all. Like, I guess the other question I would ask would, we would need a neutral third party to say, would the spelling mistakes actually have made your argument any better? Or was the argument already good enough? But the prof needed something to be able to say or speak to. And so I take that in. I say, how often do I do that? How often do I make my educational path to this point about my ego and not about your process?
There was no rubric, right? Here's the assignment.
Yeah.
Here's what you need to argue for or against. This is your assignment.
Well, you are the rubric then.
Well, you know what? There was no. It's university, man.
No, I got you.
Maybe things haven't changed. I'm just saying.
If there's no rubric, though, then you're the rubric. You're being measured against.
I'm being measured by whatever he wanted to measure me against.
Yeah, exactly. Arbitrary, right?
Very arbitrary. So look at the power there.
Yes.
Right? Hey, young kid who's in my class, and he had like 300 people in that first year law class. Yep. I'm gonna mark your essay, and I'm gonna give you the mark I think it deserves for whatever reasons I think are valid. And so, but again, I was a little minion then. I'm not a minion now. Mm-hmm. And I will speak truth to power now. But having said that, so I can say, in a positive perspective, what has that done for me as a teacher? There's lots of times that I'll say to kids, you've got a lot of great ideas here. So the whole idea component of your writing is amazing. It's level 4. You know, the grammar, punctuation, spelling component of your writing is not level 4. It's probably a 2. When I say probably, I'm like, well, bring me the anchor charts. Like we go through that. But the kids don't the kids are good with it now. They get me. So they're like, okay, well, Mr. C's not just making this up. He's right. I didn't do this and I didn't do that. And these are the things I should be doing during this formative process to show that I'm getting better at writing. And even with their behavior, I've said to a kid, I've said, your behavior stinks, but that's not going to change your math mark. You earned a level 3 in math. Your behavior is a 1+. And that's what your report card's going to say. So even I've gotten better at separating the two, but I'll tell you, it's hard to do sometimes because I grew up in a system that didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a system where, I found out some of my friends from elementary school were gifted writers, amazing readers, excellent mathematicians, because in high school, when they weren't dealing with the nonsense of elementary school, they weren't being penalized for their behavior. It wasn't connected to their academics. And they were saddened. They were like, I can't believe that Miss So-and-so almost failed me in grade 3 because I would talk back to her, but she ignored everything I ever did in math. And I would like to think that that's changed. I know for me, it's changed. I know for me, it's different for me because I've lived it, and I guess I've never really been that aware of it until now, talking about this first year professor. And I loved this professor. This professor, I would go, when I was doing my master's at the university down the street, I'd go back and still visit my professor. I'd go in on Tuesday or whatever before I'd go to the university up the street. I'd go in, and I knew he had office hours. I'd just stick my head and say, what's going on? I'm doing my master's now. And we'd chat or whatever. He was a great dude once I got to know him. Doesn't change the fact he was white. I just wanted to throw that out there. He was white. He was from Eastern Canada. He was the stereotypical professor. His office reeked academia, the way he dressed, everything about him was what my father wanted me to experience in university, And because I was under my father's spell, I would do what my father said. And there's so many layers, but at the end of the day, there's so much you could take apart with it too and be like, well, you expected all these things, but you never told me you expected it. It was all unwritten. It was all based on your mood and your interpretation all the time. That's just university. And you pay for that. I was paying what, like $600 for that course, $700. And, and I took more of his courses. As time went on, I took 2 more of his courses because he was teaching them. And you know what? When I did have a computer, I was getting A's. So I guess to his credit, he wasn't distracted so much by, the stuff that my typewriter was causing. And I was getting full marks. But by that point, I had also laid a foundation with him. He knew the type of student I was. He knew I was coming for office hours. He knew I was going to ask tough questions. He knew I was putting in the work. So in a way, I set myself up for those A's, if you will, right? Like he knew I could do it. And so I was probably getting A's sometimes maybe when I didn't deserve them. I will tell you though, when I got to graduate school, I was getting all A's, and there was one course, there was a group assignment, and I got a B+. I was on the phone so fast, called the professor, and I said, I got a problem. He's like, what's wrong? I said, I got a B+ on this work. Oh, well, he said whatever. And I said, no, it's not going to fly. I'm not getting a B+ on this assignment. It was a group assignment. You're taking marks away from me because of other people's lack of whatever. He's like, well, but you're part of the group. I said, you're going to fix this. You're not going to argue that. It's not going to work on me. Do you want me to come in, or do you want to keep talking over the phone? He said, well, tomorrow we got class. You want to talk about it before class? I said, yeah, I'll be there. And literally I was there waiting at his door when he got to his door. And I could tell by the look on his face, he was a young professor, but he was like, oh shit, this guy's here to play. He's not messing around. So we sat down and I said, what's your argument? So he told me. I said, well, here's my argument. This is why I don't deserve a B+. I deserve at least an A-. And we went through it. And by the end of it, he said, okay, you've convinced me. I'll change it to an A minus. And I was like, I was proud of myself and really happy, but I spent an hour of my life. I spent an hour dealing with him, like 20 minutes one day on the phone, 40 minutes in his office, arguing with a PhD to try to up my mark from a B plus to an A minus because of his BS around group work, that I was going to pay for my group's lackluster work. I was like, well, my proportion's not lackluster and I can't control what other people do. And we went into it, and he's got a PhD in clinical psychology. So I'm like, you understand human behavior. What did you suggest I do to convince these people? I'm no leader, like I'm no military general. I don't, impose that on people. Like, you should have seen the roads I was taking to get my mark bumped up one grade point. And it worked. And I said to him, dude, I don't want to do this again. So I said, if you're going to give any more group work, I will be in your office to tell you I'm not interested. Double the assignment for me. I'm not working with these people who don't give a shit whether they get an A or a B. I care. Graduate school for me is it. This is the end of the road. So I'm leaving, guns a-blazing. I will leave having been a garbage student all my life up to this point. And it was awesome because he was like, okay, Roland, I get it. He knew. He was like, Roland will push back. And I told him, I don't care if you have a PhD. I don't care what your job is. I pay you to teach me. You're not teaching me this. It's not going to work.
He, back to the grammar of equity, his expectation also was that you somehow would be using the tools of power in the same way that he is, in the same way that your colleagues are. And I think the expectation was that you should somehow have control over your classmates, your teammates, in a way that I would argue I never felt I had any sort of that control over my classmates in general. I would say anytime now when when I just finished PQPs, we had group work. There was never any element where I thought that I could compel somebody to sort of follow a line in order to improve my performance. I mean, it's the strangest kind of mindset to be in when you're in group work, and all it really is portion work, right? Because you're taking care of your space. But the expectation that you would be able to exercise an element of control over your classmates and your assessment should be contingent on that is ridiculously privileged thinking. And you stepping up, I'd agree. You spending an hour to do this is a drop in the bucket for individuals that are constantly feeling like they have to step up and address these kind of situations, to which the system doesn't change. You exploit a certain momentary weakness in the system, but the system doesn't change, right? I mean, unless you found out this individual changed their marking scheme moving forward. But kudos to you for stepping up. But that's got to be exhausting to sort of feel like that's how you're going to establish or account for your learning, by instructing the assessor clearly on how they're supposed to assess you. And I get it. That's entirely anyone's right. You missed this. You didn't see this properly. I think that you sort of didn't really take in the wisdom here. That's fine. Any student should be able to advocate that way. But there's other layers cracking off in this moment. There's other pieces sort of moving in this moment.
I think I ended with something like, for all the B pluses you're giving out and nobody coming to talk about wanting an A minus, I said, you gotta do something here. I said, consider that for a minute. And I remember the look on his face, like, oh my God, this guy is really going for this. I remember saying, for all the B pluses you've given, nobody's ever come to complain about why they deserved more. I said, you can do this. Mm-hmm. That was like at the very least, you can do this. It was now that I look back on it, it was kind of awesome that I stepped up. But at the time I didn't know what was going to happen, but I thought, hey, I can live with this, or I can do something about this. And it's trickled down to my 10-year-old who just had a group assignment, and he was worried because he was trying to control what other people were doing. And I said, you can't do that. You can't control what they do, but I want to do well. I said to him,
That's
Let's
sad. That makes me sad. That makes me sad as an educator. It makes me sad as a father.
well, we found out that, we had him talk to his teacher and figure out exactly what would happen. And he said that the teacher said, "Don't worry about it." And my son had already said, like, I'm confident we're going to do well, but I can't control the other person, nor do I want to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can even tell you all the parts I did and all the parts they're doing, and you can see that there may be a difference. Because we're working on this weeks early, and the parts that were assigned to the other child are not, nobody's even logged in to do any of the work. And I said to my son, well, you can't control that. You can't control this person starting as early as us, right? We don't know their context. I don't know if they have a computer at home. I don't know. And I said to my son, you're doing crazy stuff that, like, even my students won't do. Like, you're at home saying, okay, dinner's over. Let's work on my science Google Slides project, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, give me a break, kid, you know? So long story short, it's just funny that I now have to temper a 10-year-old to be like, relax. You can't control other people. You can control the work you put in. You can document the work you put in. You can advocate for yourself before it's even handed in and say, listen, this is my concern. This is the work I did. I can't control other people. How is this going to work against me? That's not fair. That's not cool. And I said to him, if you're not satisfied with your conversation with your teacher, then that's when it's time for me to step into the conversation as your father to advocate for you. And hey, even as an educator, if I have to go there, I don't care. I'm done caring. And my wife and I learned the hard way with the older one. Sometimes you're going to end up in a situation where you're going to have to take the parent hat off and put the teacher hat on,
Mm-hmm.
and use your professional judgment to explain your position. I don't care. Do what you want with me as a professional in that case. I'm here for my children. I'm not here for you, and I'm not here for this system. I'm here for my kids. And if that means that I need to speak up because of something you're doing that I don't think is right, then I will. Because even if I weren't a teacher, as a parent, parents have called me on things, and I don't always agree with the parents, but I listen to them. And
Mm-hmm.
my approach has always been, let's find a middle ground. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I understand your position. Let's find a middle ground. I think I this is what I've always tried to do. I don't know if parents agree with it or not, but this is what I've always tried to do. I've never been, this is my way or the highway. And if
Mm-hmm.
I have, then it's been for very black and white system type things, which even now bothers me because maybe I was under the spell of a system that wasn't being equitable, that was being racist. I
Yeah.
don't know, but now I know.
Bunch of randoms that you lit up in me wanting to always I've taken this conversation back. The part of this conversation that we're doing right now about the sort of grammar equity, um, or equity of grammar goes back to me student success meetings, asking flat out, why is it that we think curriculum is going to help this kid, and having people sort of wonder, well, what does that conversation look like? What does it look like to actually talk about helping a kid without tying it to curriculum? And that's the conversation that I feel like I'm trying to spend more time in right now. Um, in our current, so, my former portfolios, working student success, working with students expelled, on suspension, expulsion, spec ed, finding my way into conversations that support student success but have nothing to do with curriculum, and redirecting us if we're sort of assuming that moving from a B minus to an A plus addresses the situation that we're in. Not fighting back, not pushing back on what you were able to achieve, but just making sure that as a professional, we're having conversation. You pushed your prof to be in that space. Consider your B plus stamp, and whether or not you want to keep using that, and no one's pushing back on it. So I like being in that conversation around where I feel like the system's being called out, and I'm a person in that system that can help make a change. So is curriculum actually what's going to help this kid? It leads me to think of, is a laptop actually what's going to help this kid? And this is where I'm starting to think about, again, the grammar of the conversation. spending a lot of time right now making sure that every kid has a laptop is only one part of what will actually make them feel good about being in school or successful in school. And the students that are forgetting their laptop in the quick step transition back and forth between school, well, that's a truth. It does. I don't. The system looks at that, I think, as a failure of the kid. Why didn't you bring your laptop? As opposed to, I totally understand why you didn't bring your laptop, because the constant flip flop is confusing. So that compassionate response within these equity conversations, so critical. And I think the last part, which dang, I lost. I should have started with the last first, because that's what you lit me up on. Yeah, it's gone. As soon as we get to the off ramp, it's going to be there. It's totally going to be there in the off ramp. I think that
It'll come
yeah,
back.
it'll come back. You'll end up getting it as a text afterwards. Where we kind of started, the equity conversation here was around. It was sort of around, that idea of, I think, being tired currently. I think it's around who's the us in the conversation of creators. If it's hurting podcasters, I think that where I just want to end this thought on is something that you said near the tail end. And it talks about meeting, kind of arriving at the middle ground. And I think that if we're going to use that measurement, which on one hand sounds uber equitable, if the middle ground is if the middle ground doesn't actually take into the account that sort of like the property line of education, because the middle ground can't be from the property line to wherever the educator is sitting, as in, well, let's meet in the parking lot on this. It actually has to be the middle ground between wherever that kid or family locates and where you perceive your educator anchor to be. And if we don't really have a clear understanding about what the community needs, then I think inevitably the middle ground is still going to be on school property. And if the middle ground is entirely on school property, then that's not an equity decision. That's still something that benefits the school. Whereas if you feel like your middle ground can be extended just beyond the school property line, then I think that is a better equity solution to whatever that would be. And I think it also starts to extend the school. When one of the last discussions that didn't get fleshed out in our equity meetings was just flat out two different things. What do the kids need? What do we need to do to get it to them? And how quickly can we do it? And I'm going to throw a shout out to Pam Agua, who one of the things that she's sort of examining right now, one of her questions for herself, and asked if I can, use it as well, is examining our social identities, which could also be our professional identities, and how do our social and professional identities affect turnaround time in supporting the students that need it. And I think that really does sort of place that marker on the property line. Are we creating solutions that the halfway point or the middle ground is still on school property? Or are we understanding that the halfway point or the middle ground actually is slightly off school property? And how do we get to that space? I think that speaks to building community in a far more sort of broad fashion, a slightly more diffused fashion, because you're not quite sure what happens. When you drive off when you feel the bump on your car tires of leaving the school driveway, like for some people that's transformational. They become themselves again, right? They can leave the teacher part behind. It's at the school. That bump, front tire, back tire going off the curb is my cue, my trigger to know that I now have to transition into dad style, or I now have to transition to spouse style, or I get to, whatever person you transform into there. But, that's not the midpoint for some of our students. The midpoint exists just off the property line. That's my random on the tail end.
Thank you for the
So
random.
random.
Um, yeah, I was just thinking pencils before computers were the thing, pencils
Hmm.
were the thing.
You did an
And
episode on that, bro. I can remember you mentioning that one of our first conversations in the season. It might have even been like maybe it was, dude. We might have been going back to season one, like episode 2 or something like that. You talking about prepping the pencils and how that is essential tools in your room, making sure the pencil. And I think I got a giggle off it. I'm like, yeah, dude, you go sharpen your pencils. But I get it. I do get it. But you said those words, the essential, the essence of the pencil.
the pencils are the equivalent to cigarettes in prison.
Mhm.
It's like it's worth a lot. There's so many of them, yet never really taken care of properly. I
Mhm.
always worry computers are being treated the same way as pencils. So my students and I, you would die laughing. Actually, anybody,
I have to be honest. I wish where I stand, I wish computers were like pencils because where I stand, computers are like gold.
they are.
So yeah, so I would love because in my experience, because pencils aren't used that much at high school, they're kind of like disposable. I would love for us to get to a space where we could actually look at computers like pencils. Like they're just kind of like they are wallpaper. They're always there. They're everywhere. You just, you walk past, you can just grab a computer. It's right there. There you go. Take it. Bring
Do
it
you know how
back,
many?
maybe.
So before the computer,
Yeah.
so where pencils when pencils were more abundant in my classroom, I would literally walk up to kids and like take the pencil out of their fingers and walk away, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'd say, "You're abusing your pencil.
Mm.
What you are doing with it right now is going to break it or cause problems, and you need it. It's one of the ways you communicate to me what you know. So when you treat that tool poorly, I will save the tool. I will take it from you until you are ready to treat it with the respect it deserves." And I've done it with computers too.
The
I've
dark
walked
side of scarcity thinking. The
I've
dark side.
yeah, I've walked up to kids and literally picked up the computer, turned around, walked away, and they're like, "Mr. C, what are you doing?" I'm like, "What is the reason for you to hit the enter button 50 times really hard in a row? What is the purpose of this? We're in a Google document. So we're typing something out, and all I hear is and I look over and you're hammering that enter button like you've won the lottery and you could
Mhm.
buy 100 more of these." I said, "No 100 more, bro. This is it."
Reminds me of playing decathlon. You remember the video game Decathlon?
Kids are not allowed to play those games in my class because of the way they smack the buttons and
Dude,
stuff.
but
Yeah, but I remember
that's you know what? I'd be showing up at the arcade. I'd be showing up at the arcade because my finger could fit just between the buttons. Dude, I would totally this. I probably still have bruises where you put the pencil like that and you're like tap, 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 so you
that.
could just hit one button in order and then jump. Tap, 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 jump. I'm doing the hurdles. Tap, 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 tap. I love that. Dang, I want to go find that video game somewhere. Yeah, but you're right. It does. You start smashing on the keyboard. It's not meant for that.
I gave all my kids a mouse this year. And with the pandemic, I said, "Listen, these these mice are from the dollar store. They're not very good. So you have to treat them really well because a lot of my kids were getting into Minecraft, and it's a lot easier to play Minecraft with a mouse." Here we go again, right? So I tell them, "Listen, I paid for these out of my pocket. These do not belong to the school. So every time you disrespect the mouse, it hurts me, like personally, because I work hard here and then I use this money to buy stuff to help you do awesome stuff." Well, there's always going to be there, there's always something that breaks. It's nobody's fault, but then there's always something that breaks, which is your fault. And I got no problem calling you on it. And we recently had a mouse break because a kid was smashing it or something. So the kid says, "Now what?" I said, "Well, I guess you're not playing Minecraft anymore." And he was not happy. He's like, "You're working against me." I'm like, "Working against you? Where'd you get the mouse from?" He goes, "You gave it to me." I said, "Who bought the mouse?" He goes, "You did." Uh-huh. So I gave him one of these looks like, "Do I look like your mom?" He's like, "No." I said, "Do I look like your dad?" He says, "No." I said, "Exactly. I'm neither. I don't have to buy you anything. I don't have to give you anything. I did it to help you. You got upset and smashed the mouse. Well, am I going to stay in for recess? No, you're just never going to play Minecraft again." Right? "Oh, Chris, look at this. Chris Clough, check this out. Chris D says you need mice. I will see what I can do. Chris, that is a big thank you to you, my friend. If you can get me mice, I would totally appreciate it. It's going to happen, especially the dollar store stuff. I know they're junk. You should see some of my kids, the way that they protect their mouse. They will take it, Clough, and they will covet it. They will hold it close, and they take care because they know if it goes away, we got nothing. They know that. And they know we can't share them because Mr. C can't clean 20 mice a day, put them in a box, and then take them all out again. The mouse I give you is the mouse you're going to use until it's gone or you've worn it out.
Here's the thing. Netflix has taught us otherwise. There's no scarcity in movies. There's just subscription. So I'm going to give a thumbs up to Chris, but I'm going to ask the question, is this a subscription service or is this 10 mice that he's giving you? Because if it's 10 mice, that doesn't address the issue. It addresses part of the issue, but we are now in a place where subscription service rules. I'm looking at my stack of DVDs here, and I'm actually thinking to myself, I'm questioning now, why did I keep buying DVDs when I could have had a subscription service with Netflix? I'm looking at some of my CDs. I'm like, well, no, okay, I'll have to do this two different ways because no, it's kind of similar. So Columbia House, why do I still have Columbia House cassette tapes? Well, I'm kind of thinking to myself, this was before we sort of but accepted subscription service. Now, subscription service is dark side math, right? Because you're going to pay more. But the other thing there, it's always there. You need a mouse. Here's a mouse. And I get that it's also creating waste. I get that part. So I don't know what the midpoint is. This midpoint has to be partially in the community, not just on school ground. If this is only 10 mice, then that's on school ground. That's a midpoint that's on school ground. That's a middle ground that's on school ground. What are the benefits of subscription service thinking? Where there is no limit on the actual number of mice that you can have. Come on, Chris, buckle down, Chris.
Chris says he's looking for refurbished mice from our distributors. And I listen, I hear what you're saying, Clough. And
I'm poking. I'm poking.
No, that's fine.
I'm poking.
I appreciate what Chris is doing. It's and again, I have colleagues, I have friends that this isn't their priority. So I would rather they go to the library and say, I need 5 mice rather than me. Because that's the other thing too. Like, I don't want to take too much of a turn here, but sometimes there's a target on my back, right? Because I'm so interested in the tech integration. I kind of learn how to use it and how to make it work for my students. There's a bit of a target on my back. So for example, I have extra devices in my room that I've accumulated over years of being a part of projects and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm not the one signing out the extra Chromebook box every second day. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I've not requested it once because I don't need it. I don't need to do that. I have what I need. The people that don't have what they need, that's for them. So it was the same thing with the mice. I bought a bunch of them, but hey, if Chris Demers wants to help me out, I'm not going to say no. And he knows they're going to be used well, and they're going to be loved, and they're going to be taken care of. I think I can say he knows that about me from years of working with me and understanding what I do.
I bet they're going to be treated exactly like pencils.
They better be.
For better or for worse.
Michelle says she bought a class set last year from an online site.
She also said I'm awesome. Or is that Demers? I think I'm going to choose to say she's talking about me.
Fair enough. That's the beauty of having the same name with other people. But she bought a class set. They're important for the aging Chromebooks. 100%. I know for my aging Chromebooks, I tell the kids, I rather you break the mouse than you break the touchpad, right? Because touchpad is like emergency only type thing. Let's see what else. Michelle says she didn't pull them out this year, having grade 1s and 2s. She wasn't sure what she was going to get into. I will say, though, Michelle, that you need to, well, this is the funny thing. You got one experienced teacher talking to another experienced teacher, but what I would suggest and what I've done with my students is I've built up I've built up the respect for the tech so much, and I've shown them in my actions that if you do not respect it, accidents happen 100%. But if you're purposely doing something that goes against the ethos of our classroom with these things, then you just lose the privilege. Like I said, when I walked over to that kid and the kid stopped tapping and I picked it up and I walked away and I said, no, 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 no. I don't care what game you're playing. I don't care what level you are at. What are you doing? We don't do that here with these devices. These devices are supposed to last. They're supposed to last. I got to milk them for all they're worth because they're like pencils. You don't get a new one until you can't use when you have any more.
So you're
Right?
down to the nub.
And some kids take pride in the nub. They're like, look, Mr.
You
C,
do.
they can barely hold it, but they're like, I can still work with it. I'm like, come see me. I'm
Yeah.
going to give you a brand new pencil.
And then other kids are crippling themselves trying to hold the nub, right? Or other kids, like their fine motor skills, they can't hold the nub, or their keyboard. You say we're going to replace the keyboard when all the letters are worn off.
Yeah.
Like I get it. Again, this is scarcity thinking, and sometimes scarcity thinking creates really cool opportunities, like this conversation with Chris saying that he has a line on it. This is scarcity thinking. This is the system convincing us that there's not enough resources. This is system thinking, right? And I know, Roland, 15 years from now, someone's going to find your cardboard banker's box of old mice, and they're going to say, what the hell? Why would anybody need this many mice? I know that there's a solution that you and I won't be around to see. But in the same way that I'm looking at my Columbia Music House tapes, and the solution, like the answer to Columbia House tapes is Netflix and Apple Music, but that solution isn't here yet. I get that as I'm talking subscription service. But the truth of it is that if $11 a month gets me as much music as I need, and I don't have to worry about a cap on it, someone's going to figure out something similar with the mice. And I do know, dude, seriously, either you're going to have a box of mice in your basement. You're like, what the hell? What am I going to do with all these now? Right? Because it becomes a dead tech at whatever point it is, where hand gestures are just what you need now, even on the low end Chromebooks, right? You're just gesturing in the air. The truth of it is, like, what I'm kind of pushing for right now is more, when I bring it back to the equity, it's about entering into this discussion, realizing that, like, even as you were talking about the necessity of mice, you also use the word privilege, and necessary things are not privileged things. They're just necessary. So I look forward to talking to you 20 years from now and saying, yeah, where did you store it? Because it's either going to be found at school because you've created a box with Art Chidiac on it, don't touch, or you're going to find it in your basement and you'll be like, what the hell? I think you're on mute.
You were quick there too. You did not wait more than like 3 seconds.
Because you looked really convinced. You looked really. I felt there was wisdom coming out. I wanted to catch you.
I appreciate that Chris Demirs didn't realize teachers were buying their own mice. Hey, Chris, we're buying a ton of stuff, and we don't always realize what you're doing. So here's the flip side. Chris says that our school board's done over $30,000 in repairs to Chromebook this year so far, and we're only halfway through the year. So listen, I appreciate this knowledge, right? Because when I go back to school, if they ever let us back in the building, I'm going to share this information with my students. I'm going to say, you not taking care of your Chromebook causes a stress on the system. Now, and they'll get it because they know my scarcity when it comes to this stuff. They get it. I know that we should have money. Our school board should have money to pay for the repairs. It's got to be built in because things are going to break. But some things break naturally and some things break in a non-natural way. And I need to get it across to my students. You can't be messing around with this stuff. You want to break something? Go home and find a low piece of tech that your parents don't want anymore. Or, hey, talk to me and I'll get you something. I'll find you a toaster for free on eBay or something, or Craigslist, and I'll let you take it apart. That's what you should be breaking, not the stuff we need for our learning at school. So, Chris Demirs, thank you for letting me know. $30,000 in repairs. Dude, I get it. I don't know That's probably way over budget because of the situation we're in, but our budget should be changing because of the situations we're in. And then Michelle says you're all awesome. So it doesn't matter which Chris we're referring to.
If we're all awesome, then none of us are awesome. Oh, totally candy stealing from me, but I appreciate the generalized appreciation. I'm gonna go with you too. Like I hope that 30K. I get that sticker shock will make you think like oh my god, we're spending so much money or too much money. But if sticker shock doesn't flip into budget forecasting, then I'm gonna call it that's ridiculous. If any tech department right now and any school board is thinking to themselves that whatever money is being spent right, like that's just the hidden cost. That's the hidden cost that everyone's been operating along the whole way. The other side too, this is also, like you said, part of the buried cost of what teachers are sort of picking up themselves. So this is a number that if school boards choose to look away from it, then they're choosing to not step fully into an equitable tech model. If they choose to not really take this as like a trumpet call to say we need to make sure that we're freeing up 350,000 K in order to maintain our tech fleet, then they're making a decision in the wrong direction. Entirely, I really do think that.
There is always that hidden cost. There's always that hidden cost, but I have to say I'm a little bit more aware of it because I know the value of the technology in the room and what it can do, how it makes my job easier, and how it makes a demonstration of learning for my students way easier. And so, for example, the minute I found out that we might be going remote and we handed back all the Chromebooks to the school, the devices I have in my room where I'm like, okay, bring them over to my desk. I'm going to wipe them down. I'm going to clean them and I'm locking them up. And the kids were like, what do you mean you're locking them up? They're getting locked up. They are going to be in computer Fort Knox until we come back. I am going to there is no issue here. None of these things are going to get damaged while we're away. None of them are going to be taken out of the room. These are my devices and or when I say that, some of them have actually been lent to me by consultants in the school board. So I have 2 computers in my room, 2 Chromebooks that were lent to me by one of our consultants who she said, hey, I've got these computers, they're not being used. I know you'll use them. Can I lend them to you? I said, yeah. She emailed me about 3 weeks ago and said, hey, I need to double check. Can I have the barcodes on the 2 computers I lent you? I want to make sure all my stuff's legit in case I need to take them back to lend out to people that don't have them. I said, 100%. Grabbed them, sent her the barcodes, took a big piece of tape, masking tape, put it on, wrote her name on it so that if she says to me, I'm coming to pick them up in half an hour, can you have them in the office? I have them both labeled. The plugs are labeled. Everything's ready to rock. So I want to make sure nothing happens to those because there's nothing worse than me responding and saying, I don't have that computer anymore. I don't play like that. So everything's locked up, and when we come back, if we return to school, thanks to you now, I'm thinking we might not, but if we return to the physical building, I can pull those out again. But until then, they are under lock and key. There's no way anybody's getting to those things.
It reminds me,
like the pencils. My pencils are locked away too.
I hear you, bro. I hear you. Oh man. So yeah, so it reminds me, I can remember talking with a colleague before about making sure at the end of the school year that everything gets labeled. And I asked them like, why? And they said, make sure you lock out this other stuff. I'm like, why? And I really was upsetting this person. No, it became upsetting to this person, me constantly asking why. And a lot of the things were, it's more secure, so we could find it again. And I'm like, what assurance do you have that any of that's going to happen when you're not here paying attention to it? Are we the only ones that have keys? No. Are we the only ones that are going to be in this room? No. Are we the only ones that are going to have need? No. So what's the assurance? And it's the mirage of security. I'm going to call it mirage of security. I appreciate all the work that you did on behalf of your own sense of security. To me, there's no value in it. Not the same value. Not the same value. The second part that it makes me think about, yes, I got to rephrase that. There is value in it, if you say there's value in it. I just like to have the question around is what is the mirage of security that you've actually created? It also reminds me of teaching summer school and rolling into, and I've told this story too before, we've been rolling this in this space for a while now where teachers go to war with other teachers. And I think in doing so, we're also going to war with students and communities when we talk about scarcity through the lens of if I show up at summer school and I can't access the tech that I need at that summer school within the exact same school board, teaching 75%, because you can always, students from outside your board can take summer school in our board. But I'm teaching 75, 85%. The number doesn't matter. I'm teaching students. And I can't get the LCD projector because they've all been locked up in some space for the summer for security reasons. But the security reasons are so that they're there when the other staff return in September. And this is really misaligned thinking. This isn't all of us working together. This isn't all of us having same access to the resources. This is subordinating summer school to regular school during the school year. And it's empowering staff to basically fight each other because that's the justification. I need it for when my students are here. And, it kind of falls into that I've been hurt before kind of a mentality. Like I'm doing this as a reaction because I've had things stolen. And probably another layer into that, somehow I feel accountable or I've been held accountable or, it's a frustrating and tiring conversation to be in because I feel like statements like this are I've been teaching for 15 years and I've heard it for 15 years. So,
we can be our own worst enemies.
And we enjoy it.
Yeah, we do. The new title for this podcast is Mirage of Security. I can't let that one go. That's a good one. But
we do stuff like that. We check the door 3 times,
the house is falling apart.
You know what it is? It's funny. It's just because the floor is not insulated. So one of the kids are right above me. I think they're building Lego or something. So yeah, something fell out of one of their hands. I can hear them talking and singing through this whole cast. But yeah, as I just looked up, I wasn't sure because I actually have some tools hanging from the ceiling. So that's the next thing. If one of the set pieces comes crashing down behind me, then it's like I didn't secure it very well. So it's all good.
Listen, I really appreciate your time today.
You too, man. You too.
This was a great cast. I mean, by our standards, in terms of just
this is some high quality stuff, man.
Talking from the heart. A more work, less words. A more fatty. Very well. That's really, really, really simple design you got going on there. You slacking or what?
Little.
That's fine. We're on break.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, shout out to Tim, to Michelle, to Chris Demers, anybody else?
Rupa.
Thank you, yeah. Rupa. The Edu Celebs, the
can
ones that
can
are
I put
not
one
good
more
with the equity.
I want to put one more piece in here. Just also shout out to Deb Donsky. Just for those that you'll know what I'm talking about. Just something happened with the Twitter feed. So yeah, shout out. I hope things get fixed, get made right for Deb. Yeah.
After I saw your tweet about that, I went and looked, and it looked like Deb was following nobody on Twitter.
Yeah. I guess that's the net effect when you're like the account got restricted for some reason, and
she stopped following people.
I don't know if it. I don't know if that's an automatic function of the algorithm when you get limited by Twitter, like when you get restricted by Twitter. I don't have the story. I'm falling on the side of I have a hard time believing that it was anything that Deb did.
Is it fixed?
I checked this morning. It was not fixed yet. It was still the account was still restricted or limited.
This is bothersome. The same thing happened to Peter Cameron.
Yes.
Ontario educator up in Thunder Bay the guy has shared so many amazing things that he's done, that other people have done. He's been a wealth of knowledge to middle school educators all over the world. And then his account got hacked and he basically had to walk away from it and start a new one. And thank God he told me, because right away I went and I blocked the new person who's taken over his account. They've literally taken it over. They changed the profile picture and they take over his account. There has to be greater security around things like this, because it's not just a stupid Twitter account that he had created and built.
Mhm.
It's like a professional learning tool, part of a network, a hub for people to come to and to go from. And man, I've not, I don't, I've not done, you know, anything close to what he's created with my Twitter account. And yet I'd be devastated if mine was just taken over. So I can only imagine. I can only
I
imagine.
just, yeah, I just went to Deb's. I just went to Deb's profile. It's still caution. This account is temporarily restricted. You're seeing this warning because there has been some unusual activity from this account. Do you still want to view it? So it's kind of a blank profile until I say yes, view profile.
She must
So
have been hacked or something.
something, yeah. I don't have any. I don't have any. However, the only outcome that I want to see to this is that her account is fully functional again, whether she starts posting up again herself or her account gets unlocked. Yeah, because her follower count is zeroed out. Um, so, and that's like you said, like Pete Cameron isn't. I would say from my experience, and it seems to be from others, this is Deb's presence is important, and it provides connections and information and I think guidance and provocations in the right in the right mix. Chris is still there. He's still out there. He's sticking in. Has he been here for almost the whole 2 hours? That's awesome.
Probably.
That's the benefits of a streaming service, right? We're not going to give it to him in like little 10-minute chunks and make him take care. That's the subscription. Just poking.
Multi-factor authentication is essential, which makes me think I need to review my accounts and make sure I've got
Yep.
that going on.
Sure, but there's privilege there. Multi-faction, especially if you like now text your mobile phone. What if you don't have a mobile phone?
I hear you, Chris. I totally understand what you're saying.
I keep coming back to this one. I'm going to chew on this bone until it's like dust in my mouth.
No, it's important for you to choose so that the people in positions of privilege and power understand and can maybe use some of that power and privilege to help others.
Yep. Multi-factor, it does. And I do have that, the two-step or whatever. And you know what? I get all surly when I have to go across the room and pick up my mobile phone, and then I'm like, oh, it's not charged. I'm like, I have to go to the basement and get my tablet. I'm like, I gotta go check my tablet now.
Chris says use your email. And yeah, he's still here. He's multitasking.
Yeah, email works. Email absolutely works. But the overall concept of the multi-step is that sometimes it also suggests you go to another device.
I have to tell you though, as a parent of a kid in grade 9, I did not want to get my son a cell phone for when he started high school, but my wife was adamant, so we went with it. Do you know how often high school teachers rely on that assumption that a kid has a cell phone? It actually gets on my nerves. Like, they have instructions for how to take pictures of your work and send it to them, and or just use your cell phone. I'm like, what if they don't have a cell phone? Like, I was really bothered by that.
Yep.
Really bothered. Now, again, we're privileged. He has one. But I'm like, what about the poor kids that don't? You know? I'm sure there's a way around it. But then you have to admit, right? That hurts too. You have to be able to say to a teacher, I don't have a cell phone. And that causes anxiety and shame, perhaps.
Well, also if your bandwidth is low, really, are you want to be sending video files, and so sending video files and images of your work, and you're either faced with, well, do I use my data to do this, because there's also there's that strange kind of mindset, like it's convenience, and sometimes we forget that convenience is also like, to be able to say that you have a convenience also means to say you have privilege. Like I have the convenience, I can grumble all I want. I have the convenience slash privilege of checking my phone. What's the 6-digit code I have to put in to get into my account? Oh, my phone's not charged. Where's my tablet? Like that's convenient that I can go and check 3 different devices, right? But students also that don't have, if they don't have strong Wi-Fi, or the fact is while they're sending images of their homework, everyone else gets like bottlenecked and can't use the Wi-Fi in the house. Or if they're choosing to use their data because the teacher said it's due on Friday, it has to be in there by 3 p.m. Send me the stills or send me the video of you working out or shoveling the driveway. I hear you. I hear you. This is the conversation about what do we see as the middle ground. Is the middle ground saying, well, let's meet middle ground. Go ahead, send it from your mobile phone. Or is the middle ground just slightly off school property?
Oh boy.
Man, happy holidays.
Happy holidays and Merry Christmas to you, Christopher Clough, and
Thank
to
you.
all our listeners. And big
I
thank
feel like
you.
that's a big group today.
It is.
There's quite a few people in the room.
This is what we had envisioned for it to become, right? Like doing our thing, having people check it out, jump in. We involve them in the conversation. They help us. They light us up in different ways. They push back.
Just meeting new people too.
Yeah, well, it looks like WCDSB is representing big time because we've had a lot of our listeners that chat here come from my neck of the woods. You know, C-Rock, I wonder where he's at. I got a funny story about Carlos before we leave.
Okay.
Me, Carlos, and Michael Leonard, who is a consultant in my school board, consultant, or I don't even know if he's got that title. He's a teacher, an itinerant teacher around experiential learning and stuff like that. We had a meeting the other day to talk about Minecraft. Well, Michael and I show up for our meeting and no Carlos. No Carlos. And the day before, Mike had sent an email and reminded us about it, and we were both in. And so as Mike and I are talking, I'm messaging Carlos. I'm like, dude, where are you? What's going on? Like, we're in the meeting. I mean, I hope everything's okay. He gets to us hours later. He had slept in. So I'm worried right now Carlos is sleeping in. He's not here at the Decoded podcast because actually, you know what? Chris Demirs and Michelle will tell you Carlos probably would have had a lot to say about what we were talking about around equity, around technology. And Carlos, you think I'm tired of solving problems? Whoa, if we had gotten him started, our Decoded podcast would have exploded today. So maybe it's okay that he's sleeping in or that he's got a life. He's doing other things.
That's wellness, dude.
That's wellness.
That's wellness.
Okay, so that was season 4, episode 16 of the Decoded podcast. We got lit up in a number of different ways. I'm looking forward to more fatty. Can you tell us what that means in English?
Love fate, love the challenge, fall in love with the problems.
Accept your fate and go with the flow, people. You can't change it, so you might as well.
More work, less words.
That's right. Okay, on that note, this was Mirage of Security episode.
Feels protective. Feels so comfy, cozy.
Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New
Year. We should be on next Saturday if everything goes well.
Absolutely.
Okay, peace.
Peace, man.